Human culture is a joint venture, not an organic whole, but a constantly changing collection of expression, thoughts and habits that are nobody's property. It goes wrong when possession is claimed. Back in our complex society, modern reproduction and mass production techniques provide exact copy-paste capabilities that make it easy to claim possessions by extracting the transformational or communicative aspects from expressions, making them items in an economy of supply and demand. Petrified items, stripped of friendship ties, literally dehumanly packaged to be able to sell. The identity of what are by nature the carriers of cultural expressions, people bound together in connections and societies, has been swept for the label of record company that has come to claim the rights of a traditional through mass production. Repetition without transformation, without accounting for new facts, can take many forms, from tumor cells to pumped around conspiracy theories, from mechanized music to even lots of officially recognized news facts. Unfortunately, much digitization is hardly anything other than blind copy-paste. In my opinion, we must stand up for our virtues, our positive humanity, and in doing so we must recognize that not all new, smart technology is good. Movement is not the same as progress. We can condemn technology application just as bad behavior. However, this is not a black and white task. Some technology is positive, such as Wikipedia, which fully meets the definition of community and life and is therefore transformational. Waging war remotely by breaking into a fighting with a drone or trawling in another continent is downright bad, but virtually all modern technology is somewhere in between these extremes. Social media, streaming services, etc. can be both good or bad. But very little would remain if by magic all copy-paste without transformation, the blind replication, were to disappear. A huge playing field for authentic human enterprise and imagination would remain outside the loop. At a time when evidence-based practice is preached just about everywhere, it is difficult to argue with this. Yet a distinction must be made between the facts and the argument from which the alleged facts derive their truth. How emerging technologies are received, what the consequences of large-scale implementations are in terms of psychological well-being or sustainability, cannot be determined in advance on the basis of facts, simply because there are no facts at the beginning. When the first cars came on the road, there were little or no fatalities, and there was no air pollution yet. There is too much a wait-and-see attitude on the part of governments, policymakers and researchers towards emerging technologies. They do not seem to want to burn themselves with argumentation until there are enough facts. By then, however, it is often too late. Now, for example, that with the corona pandemic, online meetings have become common, the term Zoom dysmorphia is increasingly appearing in scientific publications. People who have started to detest their own image, continuously distorted from an angle from below, with a nose that's far too big, and as a result start to experience psychological problems and are turned to plastic surgery. Already at my inauguration, I advocated moving to an argument-based practice, in addition to EBP. For example, based on argument-based practice, I wrote a year and a half ago, while the facts were not yet available at that time, that psychological problems would be a logical consequence of participating in meetings via online platforms in which people continuously watch their images distorted and experience themselves as both first and second or even third person. However, there was little interest in that. Arguments are often put away in advance as opinions. Finally, my argument about Zoom dysmorphia was published as an opinion in the UK magazine Education Journal. Everything that is not yet based on facts is dismissed as opinions, fake, and with this, big tech is given and takes all the space to experiment freely with emerging technologies in the loop, without having to be accountable in advance. In retrospect, if the facts have partly turned against the application, there is no turning back. So there is still no need to account for it. All wash their hands of the matter. Without argument-based practice and policy, government is by definition retrospective. Given the problems we have encountered with our planet, it is time for a change towards an argument-based practice. The United Nations Sustainable Developmental Goals point this out, as do the millennia-old virtues: prudence, fortitude, temperance, and justice. The point is that digitization has brought dichotomy, wrong, right, fact, fake, while virtue must always be found in the middle. Courage without prudence, for example, is folly. This is not a binary world by itself, so I come to my 3 recommendations. First, don't be impressed or even bribed by big tech or science. There's a paradox here. Disruption isn't always cool, but disruption is necessary to save the planet at the same time. Second, in regulating emerging technologies, psychological needs should be taken into account. Human dignity and sustainability first. And third, to an argument-based policy. No evidence without an argument. Disruption is only allowed if it certainly does not harm human dignity and the survival of the planet. So we went from bad to worse with all these disruptive blessings. Every new technology would make the dark side of previous technologies disappear. But each time new and larger dark sides appeared. Pandora's box is nothing compared to this. While the biodiversity continues to decline daily and the planet is directly threatened by large-scale human action. It's 2 to 12. Time for a change. Thank you.
Hurts to feel alone again, to repeat with no end, lose another friend. It just hurts. This